Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. For the entire road to WrestleMania, I'll be breaking down every WrestleMania with the exception of 17, 19, 20, and 21. Today I'm talking about WrestleMania 9 as seen on the WWE Network. So that being said, WrestleMania 9 kicking off with Shawn Michaels and Tatanka in a pretty good matchup, that I might say. And WrestleMania, before I get started here, is kind of remembered as one of the worst WrestleManias in history for having a terrible card. I've heard from a lot of people that it was really bad. But watching it back, it really wasn't terrible, I would say. It definitely was not a good WrestleMania. Definitely not as good as many of the 30 WrestleManias, of course, and I would classify it as a bad WrestleMania. But by no means was it terrible. It did have some points of it that were okay. It was not horrendous by any means, but and I could definitely see why people would classify it as such, and I'll get into that in a minute. But before I even get into the opener, once again, like I've said in all my reviews up to this point for WrestleMania, a lot of the early WrestleManias, at least 1 through 10, had a lot of meaningless matches. Matches were only a few minutes long. Not so much in this show. This show only had 9-10 matches, so it was not really an issue with this show, and we kind of started to move away from that as WrestleMania moved on. But I'm not going to break down every single match in the show because it would take forever, because not every match in the show is noteworthy. But that being said, like I said before, Michaels and Tatanka kicking off the show in a really good matchup for the Intercontinental Championship. I thought it was great. Sensational Sherry in the corner of Tatanka, and Luna Vachon in the corner of Shawn Michaels. And Sherry and Michaels, of course, had that history with each other. Sherry was the former manager of Shawn Michaels, or I think would become the new manager of Shawn Michaels, or I can't remember exactly when it was. But still, though, really good matchup. Tatanka was the last person I would expect to get a great opener out of. And that Tatanka, to me, and I've talked about this with RJ on WrestleRant Radio before, and then he felt so random, even to bring him back in 06, 07 on the SmackDown brand. But still, he was not a bad worker by any stretch of the imagination. And he worked a really good opener here with Shawn Michaels. And Shawn Michaels, I mean, newsflash, is amazing, so it's not really too surprising that he was able to get a great match out of Tatanka to kick off the show. But for the Intercontinental Championship of all things, and I think the IC title, even though it could be featured more prominently later on in the card, like it was in WrestleMania 6 in the main event, the first and only time that's ever happened in WWE history at WrestleMania. But still, though, to have it kick off the show, I thought was really cool. Got a lot of time, almost went 20 minutes, and I was not a fan of the count-out victory for Tatanka, and like I've said before, I'm not a fan of the DQs and the countouts and all that other bullshit with the early WrestleManias, but it was par for the course in the mid to late 80s and the early 90s, so I wasn't too surprised by that. But really good opener, though. Up next, another tag team match. The Steiner brothers taking on the Head Shrinkers, and a really good tag team match. The Steiners are widely regarded as one of the greater tag teams, one of the best tag teams of their generation. And while they're not already in the WWE Hall of Fame is beyond me, but hopefully we see them inducted at some point in time. I think they're great. They worked a really good matchup here with Samu and Fatu, the Head Shrinkers. Also, of course, one half of them was Rikishi, one of the newly inductees in the WWE Hall of Fame as of this past week. So another really good tag team match, which is, again, no surprise, because as I've said in some of my past WrestleMania reviews, that the tag team matches were always really good. Of all the matches on the show, they usually were the ones to steal the show in the early WrestleManias. So up next, we had Doink the Clown defeating Crush. It was not really a good match whatsoever. We had Double Vision. That was kind of the whole thing with two Doinks and whatever else. And so the matchup was pretty stupid. Doink the Clown was not a wrestler to be pushed, but he did get over as a heel. So there was that, and he was entertaining in that respect. But the matchup itself was pretty throwaway, and the finish was pretty cheesy. But like I said, anything involving Doink the Clown is going to be cheesy, so that was not a shock. So I wasn't disappointed or anything. Up next, another quick squash with the WrestleMania debut of Razor Ramon defeating Bob Backlund, and Bob Backlund making his WWE return after many years. One of the longest reigning WWE champions in history. I think does not often get the credit he deserves, but still, though, pretty nice matchup, and he would go on to become a heel and become one of the more prominent figures in WWE in the mid-90s. So decent stuff there. Tag team title match up next with Money Inc., Ted DiBiase and IRS defending the titles against the Mega Maniacs, Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. And I've expressed my thoughts on Brutus Beefcake in the past. I never really thought he was any good. I thought he was very overrated, and the only reason why he ever got a push in WWE and anywhere he went was because he was buddy with Hulk Hogan, as we saw on this show. And Hulk Hogan was making his return to WWE on this show after being away to film a movie, I think it was, and he was supporting a nice shiner on, I think, his right eye or left eye. I can't remember what eye it was, but they tried to stray away from that as much as possible. with the camera work. But even the commentators mentioned it. They didn't stray away from it at all. They mentioned that he got like in a fight the night before and he was attacked by Money Inc. So I guess that was a nice storyline excuse, and people probably believed it. I mean, this was 93 after all. But still, the match itself I didn't really enjoy, especially the finish. That was stupid. Hogan and Beefcake acted like complete heels, and this was not the first time that would happen. Hogan would act, do a lot of heel tactics during the course of his run, even though he was the biggest babyface in history. So that wasn't really that shocking for that to happen on this show. But of all the tag team matches that I've seen in the early WrestleManias, this was easily not one of the better ones. It was okay for what it was. It wasn't terrible. I hated the finish. I thought it was stupid. Money Inc. I mean, I hate DQs, period. But to have the heels go over after Hogan and Beefcake were the ones who did the heel tactics, that was really stupid. Like in today's age, that would constitute as a double turn, where it wasn't on this show. But that was really dumb. And I understood they wanted to protect Hogan for when he won the title in the main event. Later on in the night, which was also another dumb idea, and I'll get to that in a minute. But still, this was not one of my more favorite matches from this show. Up next, Lex Luger defeating Mr. Perfect in a really, really good matchup. Both Mr. Perfect, one of my favorite workers of this generation. I thought he was great as a character, as an in-ring worker. Sometimes did not get the credit he deserves, in my opinion anyway. And Lex Luger kind of getting started in WWE at this point in time. So decent to good stuff there from Luger and Perfect. Up next, Undertaker having his third WrestleMania matchup, going 3-0 against Giant Gonzalez, and easily. And I'm not going to... I still have yet to watch his match with Big Boss Man and some of his later WrestleMania matches, but easily his worst, from what I've seen, WrestleMania showing against Giant Gonzalez. Such a stupid matchup, and Giant Gonzalez, El Giganto, I think they would call him in WCW when he eventually left WWE. They had him in this big hairy suit. It was so stupid. He looked like a complete goof. He was no threat to Undertaker whatsoever. The match sucked. He was not a good wrestler. God rest his soul, I think he passed away a couple years ago, but as a wrestler, the guy was terrible. So this matchup was completely deplorable, and Taker won by disqualification after Giant Gonzalez used, chloroform. He used a piece of chloroform to knock out The Undertaker. Like, how stupid is that? And Undertaker would come back to life and take him out, and the feud would unfortunately continue going into SummerSlam. It was so stupid. But yeah, that was a complete waste of time. We had Yokozuna in the main event taking on Bret Hart for the WWE Championship, and 93 was the first year where the Royal Rumble winner would go on to earn a championship matchup in the main event of WrestleMania. And Yokozuna winning the Rumble match that year, being pushed as a top heel at this point in time, won the Royal Rumble and went on to win the championship on this show. And the matchup was only barely 9 minutes long. It was a very boring matchup. Yokozuna seemingly won the title out of nowhere. Bret Hart had the sharpshooter applied. Mr. Fuji at ringside threw I think it was sand or dust or something into the face of Bret Hart, allowing Yokozuna to pick up the victory and the championship. Although it was very short-lived, as Hulk Hogan came out to rescue, quote-unquote, his buddy Bret Hart, and would eventually go on to contend for the championship in random fashion. I don't know if he was due to a rematch or whatever, but he would face Yokozuna in a subsequent matchup on this show for the WWE title and would beat Yokozuna for that championship. So that was random. I thought it was stupid. It made Yokozuna look weak. It was a worthless title reign or worthless title win, only to have it lose to Hogan. They might as well have just done Bret and Hogan. I know Hogan, when he won back the championship on this show, I didn't watch it or anything. I just read up on it after this show wrapped up. I read it up on Wikipedia that Hogan was once again due to go away for a movie later on in the year, and he did not want to drop the championship to Bret Hart because he believed it wasn't believable. He thought being the huge guy that he was, he didn't think it'd be believable from a storyline standpoint for him to drop the championship to Bret Hart. Just a lot of politics and a lot of bullshit. It was so stupid. So he would eventually drop back that championship to Yokozuna in the summer of 93 and would hold that championship until WrestleMania 10, when him and Bret Hart had a rematch for that belt and Bret Hart would win it back, and I'll get to that in my WrestleMania 10 review. But I just thought that was so dumb. You might as well, if Hogan was going to win back the championship on this show, you might as well have just done Hogan and Hart and just have Hogan beat Hart. Like, I would have been fine with that. At least it would have been, we would have gotten that matchup in WWE. That was a matchup we never got in WWE. I don't know if we ever got in WCW, but they missed the boat on that matchup, much like they did with Hogan and Ric Flair the prior year. Still, though, that was really, really stupid. The match between Yokozuna and Bret Hart was not good, and then the subsequent storyline with Hogan and Yokozuna and him winning the belt back was very, very dumb. So to kind of end a mediocre night on a sour note. So this was not a good WrestleMania. By no means go back and watch it on the WWE Network. There weren't many, like, quote-unquote saving graces of it like there have been with some other WrestleManias. Like I said, I thought the first two matches on the show were really, really good. The Intercontinental title match and the tag team matchup between the Steiner brothers and the Head Shrinkers I thought were both great. But everything else left something to be desired. I didn't like the tag team title match. Taker and Giant Gonzalez sucked, and the main event was not good either, and what happened there. So I would call this a bad WrestleMania. I don't know if I would call it the worst in history. I mean, I'll reserve that judgment until after I watch every WrestleMania and see which one really truly was the worst. But this was a rather bad WrestleMania in comparison to a lot of the others that I've talked about here on the channel in the last couple of weeks. That being said, folks, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Always appreciated. My WrestleRant video review on Tuesday will be covering WrestleMania 10. We're only a third way through my WrestleMania reviews. I'm only on WrestleMania 12 as I record this, so I have a lot of more WrestleManias to watch and review in the weeks and the next month ahead of us, so I look forward to that. But as always, folks, make sure to show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing. All of that is greatly appreciated. Make sure to find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews, and make sure to stay tuned on Tuesday for my review of WrestleMania 10. Once again, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys then.